In line with the award's position as a champion of ESG excellence, BDO has adopted carbon neutrality as a theme this year in recognition of the urgent need to combat climate change. To address this theme, we are now holding a symposium about shaping business strategies for carbon neutrality. 今年我们有一个讲座，就是主题是碳中和。除了要配合提倡卓越 ESG 发展的宗旨之外呢，也是要带出应对气候变化的迫切需要。我们现在即将就要举行打造碳中和之业务策略的座谈会。Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our guests of the symposium. May I invite our moderator, Mr. Eric Ng, News Editor, Climate Desk, South China Morning Post. 我们的座谈会主持人，南华早报气候变化新闻编辑吴文斌先生。Mr. Ricky Cheng, Director and Head of Risk Advisory BDO Hong Kong. 立信德豪会计师事务所董事兼风险资讯服务总监郑文汉先生。And our speakers, Mr. Ben McQuhae, Founder, Ben McQuhae and Company, and Honorary Advisor of Hong Kong Green Finance Association. 是 Ben McQuhae and Company 创始人兼香港绿色金融协会特别的顾问 ，and also Professor Christine Low。我们有请陆工会教授 ，Chief Development Strategist at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology 香港科技大学环境研究所首席发展顾问。好，现在我们就交给我们的 Moderator， 有请。
Thank you. And welcome everybody to tonight's panel discussion. I'm very pleased to have three expert about ESG matters here. And let me start by asking Ricky to set the stage for our discussion. Ricky, so this is the 5th BDO ESG Awards, and so you have plenty of experience looking in depth into the disclosures and the aspirations of a lot of listed companies. So what's your general impression of how much they have achieved in terms of the decarbonization and driving towards net zero?
Thank you, Eric. Well, based on the 5th BDO ESG Reporting Performance Survey that we have conducted and issued early this year, actually we noted that there are like top 5 decarbonization measures that a company adopted by Hong Kong listed companies actually, including like increasing the investment in the green technologies, improving the energy consumption efficiencies, increasing the adoption of renewable energies, as well as phasing out the fossil fuels, and also enhancing the product design so as to reduce the product carbon footprint.
Do you see some areas that maybe they haven't quite done so much, and that maybe there are opportunities for them as well?
Well, I think this kind of observations have been evidenced by the decarbonization practice of the award-winning companies this year. Say, for example, in the construction industry, we noted that there are companies that are using like recycled building materials to reduce the carbon emission. They also use AI and also smart platforms to monitor the performance of chiller plants, say, for example. And they also, one of the companies also make a very good investment in the development of the construction material, such as eco-blocks, which is made of recycled plastics. So these are the very good examples that demonstrate Hong Kong listed companies, like in the construction sectors, they are really contributing to decarbonization. Now, of course, there are too many things that companies can do to further improve the journey towards the decarbonization way.
Okay, let me turn to Christine and Ben. Christine, you have talked to many companies about their decarbonization journeys, the challenges. And so what's your impression in terms of the success cases and also maybe the challenges that you have come across, that you have heard of? For example, can you cite some industries that you're familiar with?
Well, I think it depends on, first of all, where you're operating. So notice tonight that quite a number of companies here have their main businesses on the mainland. So on the mainland, a key driver is government policy, especially those businesses that have major emissions. So I always like to talk to a company, when they want to discuss about what else they can do, to really try to discuss with them which ones are the ones that you think are your key drivers. Now, actually, the response are all quite interesting. Some of it, obviously, is government. They're changing their regulations, and we have to comply. Secondly is sometimes are the major shareholders. And the major shareholders, some of it is because they say, well, this is national policy. And some of them say, I really want to do much better in sustainability, so I'm willing to spend the money. Some of them say, well, I'm trying to get to understand my business better from a sustainability perspective because I don't yet quite understand where are the risks and opportunities. So hopefully, when they do their reporting and disclosure better, the key to then discuss is, can you make sure when you do your reporting that you take it to management and the board? Don't regard it as really just a compliance exercise. So I guess to summarize, it's really whether the company is seeing that the next step is compliance or whether the next step will help them to make a strategic decision.
Ben, what about you?
Well, I think we're here this evening to sort of celebrate sort of success in the form of I suppose sort of high quality and standout ESG reporting, and I think we need to acknowledge that as we're looking for sort of successes and in the context of sort of ESG integration, decarbonization in Hong Kong, then the fact that most, probably maybe all Hong Kong listed companies now have infrastructure in place to collect and report ESG data, and also have sort of governance in place in order to I suppose, support that. But and that's important because decarbonization is a necessary step towards being sustainable. And the journey to becoming sustainable, throws up all sorts of opportunities. And I think, we need to do a much better job in explaining to corporates and financial institutions, anyone that's going on a sort of decarbonization journey, to look for opportunity, whether it's in the form of opportunities to invest, opportunities to innovate, opportunities to command some kind of competitive advantage. But so whilst we should acknowledge the success where we have it and where we see it, we also need to be sort of mindful and sort of honest to ourselves that, climate reporting is not the same as climate action. It's not the same as decarbonization. And so whilst we become quite good at reporting, we also need to become much better at actually decarbonizing. And that's where it becomes quite problematic because, we can't just go and buy renewable energy. I mean, for most companies, probably the single greatest contributor to their sort of emissions profile will be the power they consume. But, we can't buy renewable energy, and at the moment, there aren't yet enough sort of renewable energy procurement solutions. So what do we do? And clearly, we need more tools to support our listed companies in actually sort of performing on their sort of decarbonization strategy, not just reporting.
So the key is actually to start from yourself. It's your own transition journey. Then there's, to supplement that, you can have renewable energy purchase or carbon credit offsets and other tools, right? So Ricky, so you have witnessed, the 5 years of, change in terms of the ESG disclosure and ESG performance. You have come across many companies' KPIs performance. So what do you think, in terms of their strategy, actually using the information they collected from their own operations, from their suppliers, and actually coming up with a credible transition? How do you think it has changed over the 5 years?
Well, I think they have considered a lot of things at the board level. Of course, for listed companies, disclosure is one of the key drivers that to trigger the board to consider how the company is going to be climate resilient and how to formulate their transition plan towards that. The fact is, I think the risk behind is you are addressing the stakeholders' concern, and also there are increasing demand on the information that listed companies need to disclose. Say, for example, how they are going to decarbonize their productions, how they're going to transform the product into a more low carbon product such that they can meet the customers' demands. And also, it is very important for them to meet also the common investors' needs in order to drive the financiers, funds, or resources into the companies. So I think in the whole economy and the whole ecosystem, it really is a big deal for many companies to reconsider whether they have put enough resources and efforts to transform themselves into a low-carbon business model. So I guess they are all have their learning curve, and they are all learning from each other. So it is a good journey for them to take it off to how to achieve the carbon neutrality in the coming future.
Years ago, a lot of people sort of criticized, listed companies for doing the ESG disclosure just as a box-ticking exercise. Do you get a feeling this proportion of people that are, just doing it as a box-ticking exercise has, decreased over the years? Do you have some ideas? We have 2,600 companies. How serious are they nowadays compared to, say, 5 years ago?
Well, I could only say that many of the companies are still in that learning journey, and climate change is an uncertain matter, and also uncertain in terms of how it is going to impact the business model. Of course, there are some companies, they are in a pioneer in the industry, and they are willing to spend more resources to do R&D, to invest in the product developments in order to meet the public demand due to the low carbon purpose. And there are some companies that are required to comply with the environmental regulations in the geographies that they operate. But there are also some companies that are looking at their peers of how they're doing in order to plan their decarbonization journey going ahead. Mm-hmm. So I guess this is a long way. I mean, listed companies need to think about whether they have the resources to inject, because in the market there are many SMEs and medium-sized companies. They don't have the necessary resources to support that kind of transition. So therefore, I guess many of the listed companies need to have a formal planning, okay? Make sure that the resources are available in order to decarbonize their business. Mm-hmm.
Let me turn the discussion to a higher level. Christine, you have been a legislator before. You are very familiar with the environmental policy, and government policy has a lot to do with our pace and progress of decarbonization. So as a society, what do you think we need to do more as a whole ecosystem to drive decarbonization?
Well, I'm biased, by the way. I'm completely biased on this point. I think if you leave it to the market, or if you leave it to individuals, it will not happen, because we're just not powerful enough to mobilize society. So what can mobilize society? It's not even the capital market with investors. It's government driving you, demanding and requiring certain changes. I think there's actually no real argument with this. Secondly is, okay, then, what is it that you and I can do? And then you and I sit in different, we have different positions, right, in different institutions. If you happen to run a company, or if you're a director, so I'm a director on the board of 4 companies, if you think about what it is, what are your duties, then first of all, you are there to generate value for the company for the long term. And one of the things that I think companies have to wake up and ask themselves is, in the climate and sustainability era, have you actually asked yourselves what your risks and opportunities are? I still think many companies haven't done that, and to be honest, I think the number of companies that I've seen, and of course, I've seen relatively few, right? I mean, if you're talking about in Hong Kong, there are over 2,000 companies, so, I've only really met so many. But we know who the market leaders are, right? And the market leaders who've done the best, who are really changing their strategies, are the ones who've been at it the longest, in a sense that they have already struggled through thinking about the basics. So I think we can look forward to other companies that are doing more now, that in the future, they will be first of all, you've got to identify what the risks are. If you can't tell yourself what your risks are, then I think this is a real problem. Secondly is, opportunities only comes when you have clarity about what the conditions and drivers are. And I think, to be honest, a lot of boards and management are struggling with this right now, because on a day-to-day basis, there's so many other difficult issues they have to face.
Talking about, forces, drivers, Ben, do you think the other stakeholders around the company, like the investors, the financiers, they also have, a role to play in, adding pressure to companies, or even competitive pressures among companies themselves to gain the competitive advantage? There is that force as well to drive the decarbonization.
Thanks, Eric. And I think that, we always try and focus on behalf of our clients on the opportunity. Everyone's going to have to transform and transition, and some will do it faster than others, and more sort of willingly or less, or more reluctantly. It depends on all sorts of circumstances and, of course, fact patterns. There's no doubt that for listed companies and for regulated entities, particularly asset managers in Hong Kong, there's a lot of pressure being brought to bear by sort of external investors, limited partners, et cetera, who themselves have to report or have to comply with a sort of higher standards. And so whilst there may be a tendency, and sometimes perhaps a preference, for companies to do sort of the minimum that's required to be compliant, that often doesn't really fly if your money is demanding that you deliver on a higher standard so that they can be compliant with the requirements in their own jurisdictions. So for sure we have to listen to stakeholders, and for sure they're important. But I just want to come back, if I can, just to perhaps supplement one or two of Christine's point, which I think are really important. So, in Hong Kong, as everybody knows, we have 2030 and 2050 sort of decarbonisation goals. And when I suppose those goals were first published, we were all very excited and very optimistic. But we haven't really seen anything or heard much since then. So there's no enabling regulation to support. And so for a lot of companies who want to sort of be the champions in their industry, who want to do a lot more than the minimum, it's not necessarily very clear what they're supposed to do. And I think, we would do very well, I think, if we can, sort of impose on our decision makers and policy makers to actually start drilling down and providing more clarity around what's expected. And an ancillary point to note is that there's no pathway to net zero until we have a carbon price, until we can sort of price carbon into the cost of doing business, whatever that business is. And that's another thing that we must really, really prioritize. There's no mechanism in Hong Kong for pricing carbon. There is no reliable price, and there are a number of sort of potential I suppose, solutions to that. Carbon tax, as we know, there's talk about opting into a sort of GBA, ETS, and whatever it may be. But it's absolutely essential. So I think we need more top-down guidance and actually sort of detail, because as a society, we all need to do better. We all need to change our behavior. But the reality is, and this is, I think, exactly to Christine's point, whether it's as individual consumers or as businesses, we're going to change our behavior a lot more quickly when there's a regulation or an incentive to encourage us to do that.
Yeah, so both Christine and Ben believes more top-down policies, drivers are important. Ricky, so you deal with mostly the corporates. So what about within the corporates themselves? The risk and opportunities, risk management opportunities, to grasp. Do you think that, and also competitive pressure among the companies, do you think that within the company's level and its immediate ecosystem, there is enough drivers there, or ultimately do you also believe there needs to be a higher up policy drivers? Yeah.
Well, I think the companies at board level, they know what is requiring by the regulators because the disclosure requirements up there. And they know more stringent requirement is coming out, okay? But the fact is there is some sort of incentives for them to moving forward, because they see this as a compliance and they don't see the ROI of implementing this kind of measures. But of course, just like what Christine is saying is, they don't realize the risk and opportunities in a very in-depth level. If they have already identified what kind of opportunities that are coming up during the transition business journey, so I guess there is a little bit more incentive for them to think about whether they are really putting more effort and to take more effort in doing this kind of transition journey things.
We know that Hong Kong Stock Exchange is already done the consultation on raising the bar on the disclosure and also asking the companies to do scenario analysis on climate scenarios, impacts, asking them to estimate the impacts in financial terms. That is no easy task. So you advise a lot of the companies. How do you think they could actually, what tools could help them? Or what kind of experience they can draw upon, maybe other markets that can help them do this type of analysis and come up with the right strategies for their own operations?
Well, these kind of things are really new to many of the listed companies, especially when talking about calculating scope 3 emission. And this kind of data are all coming out from the supply chain and also the value chain. Apart from that, conducting climate scenario analysis is another challenge, because this is not easy for many of the listed companies, especially when they are really medium-sized or small-sized companies. They may lack necessary knowledge, and also the board within, they may not have the capacity to analyze what the climate scenario means, what kind of range of potential outcome that may draw upon from the scenario analysis, and how they're going to react with each of the scenario outputs. So I think the first thing is they need to build up the knowledge first. They need to acquire some sort of expertise to join their boards, to give more inputs and discussions. And the next thing is to understand what the stakeholders are expecting, especially the concerns, and incorporate the perspective of the stakeholders into their decarbonization strategy. So this is the step-by-step exercise that every listed companies need to go through before they really can achieve the disclosure requirements, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Christine, just now Ricky talked about capacity. Maybe some companies do not have the right enough capacity. But Hong Kong is right next to the doorstep of GBA, where there are a lot of resources, technology, and you are familiar with the academic community on the latest green technology. So do you think there's a lot of opportunity for Hong Kong companies to tap into the resources in the greater area that we are, Greater Bay Area, for example, or even other countries in the region?
I think the short answer is no. Now, but what I'm going to say is, we're in a new era where we need to take many different types of information and data and think about how it applies to your company. Now, you're only really going to be able to do this if you have some way of understanding this in a multidisciplinary way. If we go back 2 or 3 years, what the financial regulators really wanted was, are there some easy formulas, maybe P&L account, whatever, some magic formula that you can throw at it, and bingo, we can do it. They now know that's not possible. So that's number one. Number two is, to be honest, there isn't that much we can learn in different parts of the world because the system is not settled. So what it means for Hong Kong is actually we have a small but dense group of professionals and academics and regulators. If we really wanted to break new ground in Hong Kong, and for Hong Kong to be a leader in all this sustainability thinking, what we need to do ourselves in Hong Kong is to crack this nut. The difficulty in doing that is who is willing to convene. Because convening people from different industries and disciplines requires very clear thinking about how to do it. And it takes time. Nobody ever wants to pay for things like that. So one of the things that I'm suggesting to, for example, let's say the regulator for banks is HKMA. They have venues. They are in touch with all their stakeholders, the banks. The banks are actually interested. Can they be the convener? 这局长, right? Can they help to bring people together, invite us from universities and so on? Now, then you can think about what are other types of organizations. Usually it's the non-profit institutes and so on, but you need to fund them to be able to think about how to bring people together. But Hong Kong can do it if we want to.
Ben, so you are one of the co-founders of the Green Finance Association. So you're familiar with the financial community. Do you think they can take that leadership role that Christine was talking about?
I mean, I think the answer has to be yes. I think that people will understand that all of the solutions that we are sort of talking about and touching on require collaboration, and that's collaboration between the public sector side, the private sector side, and academia, and so the list goes on. I think it's encouraging to the extent that we all recognize that we need usable, cost-effective solutions to allow our companies to report against, on a climate basis, against Scope 1 and Scope 2 and soon to be Scope 3. It's perhaps hopefully no coincidence that the Hong Kong government is now really elevating green tech as a priority focus. The jury's still out. We still have to wait and see what that looks like. But I think if there is a will, there is definitely a way. And I think that, we've been talking about sort of ESG integration and reporting, within the sort of financial sector and community for quite a few years. There's quite a lot of understanding. And so, to Christine's suggestion, I would think, in the right forum, with the right support, and it needs to be sort of cross-sectoral, support. I think, why not? Why not? Because, we're sort of celebrating today ESG reporting, but the climate aspects of the ESG report are focused on Scope 1 and Scope 2. Okay, we know from the exchanges sort of request for information in their position paper that something that's somewhat ISSB aligned is coming, and that means Scope 3 is coming, and that's a whole different challenge. And just last month, people will be aware that TNFD announced or launched their first framework, and so we should probably anticipate that TNFD is coming, and that's a whole added layer or layers of complexity, because climate and carbon are easy to measure and identify. Nature and biodiversity impact is
I
much
just want to
more
say
challenging.
that the Green Finance Association can't do it all, right? This convening issue about co-learning and co-development needs to be carefully spread out different people can take up a part of it and properly fund it. You need to also think about the design of how you're going to bring people together to have meaningful and substantive discussion over time. This is how leadership is developed at the intellectual level. So maybe the last boring thing I'm going to say is, for companies to really think about the transition and to be able to articulate it and work on it, there is an intellectual side to it. So it's really important that we try to develop that in Hong Kong. Because, I am critical of Hong Kong. We're a great professional center, but in the past, we have always left the intellectual development of ideas elsewhere. We're great professionals, so come here. When we know what to do, we know how to make money from it. But with sustainability going forward, this is really a new field where no one can give us the full picture. So I think China is also different. China thinks differently, and it's willing to conceptualize and think about systems. So in Hong Kong, how do we use what we have, and we have a lot, that can fuse this together and be kind of the thinking and implementation professional center?
Okay. Let me ask our three panelists to summarize tonight's main messages. Can each of you think of 3 words, just no more than 3 words, to summarize the key takeaways for all our guests, be they from the green tech community, the finance community, or the manufacturing community? So how can we be more cohesive and then bring this forward? Ricky, what 3 words would you like to use to summarize the key takeaways from your point of view?
Well, I will say, let's do it.
Let's do it. Great. Ben?
I would say find the opportunity.
Find the opportunity. And Christine?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Find the opportunity. Thank you very much to our distinguished panelists, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Eric.